Hey, this week we have, for Sunday preview, we have this great reading from St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 21. It goes like this. Jesus said to the chief priests and the elders of the people, "Hear another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a hedge around it and dug a winepress and built a tower. Then he leased it to tenants and went on a journey. When vintage time drew near, he sent his servants to the tenants to obtain his produce. But the tenants seized the servants, and one they beat, another they killed, and a third they stoned. Again he sent other servants, more numerous than the first, but they treated them in the same way. Finally he sent his son to them, thinking, 'They will respect my son.' When the tenants saw the son, they said to one another, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and acquire his inheritance.' They seized him and threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What will the owner of the vineyard do to those tenants when he comes?" They answered him, "He will put those wretched men to a wretched death and lease his vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at proper times." Jesus said, "Did you never read in the scriptures, 'The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone'? By the Lord has this been done, and it is wonderful in our eyes. Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that will produce its fruit." The Gospel of the Lord. Kind of a familiar image that Jesus uses, that of the vineyard, to represent the house of Israel, or today we might say the church. And it's owned by the master. It's owned ultimately by God. It's God's possession, God's thing. It's something He's created. And we're all members of that church or that house of Israel. And the first point really is that God expects us all to produce fruits. The vineyard produces grapes and wine that we can delight in, that we can enjoy. But we have to remember who the owner is. And we have to remember that each of us in our individual capacity is expected to produce our own part of the fruit. And as the story goes, the ones who were tending the vineyard refused to produce fruits. Right? And Jesus is referring immediately there to the leaders of the Jews who, worked in the temple, but they didn't produce fruits of holiness or sanctity among the people. But we're expected to. And they killed the prophets, and they didn't listen to the messengers of God. And now He sends His only Son. At the fullness of time, He sends Jesus. The Father sends His own Son. But they decide to kill Him and take His inheritance. And what's really here at the root is whether we consider the world, and particularly the church, to be God's or ours. Is it something that we're stewards of, that we need to make produce better and better? Or is it essentially our thing to do with as we wish? And we could say that about all the blessings and gifts that we receive, but especially the church. And sometimes there is the idea that we can make the church whatever we want it to be because it's about us. But in the end, really, it's about God and what God has given us, and whether we acknowledge God as the owner and His Son as the heir of that church. We've got to use everything in our life for the glory of God and for Jesus Christ, not just for ourselves.